Hey guys, so real quick, this is the Mage build that I'm using after the nerfs to damage across the board. So everybody's asking me what I'm doing now, and this is what I'm doing. So it took me a little while to come up with it, but it's incredibly powerful. So the main focus of the build is actually Mana Shield and a combination of Mana Regen from Magic Shot and Elemental Armor. So we're gonna go ahead and get into that. First, this build is more of a defensive build than an offensive one. It still allows you to have a lot of potential burst, but the damage overall is not that high compared to other classes. The thing is that this is a god in PvP, and you should not die 1v1s or even 1v2s if you play it properly. You should actually be able to 1v2 people in this situation. So the main thing you might notice right now is that we're using Atmospheric and Cold as our main stances. And the reason why why we use these is because of the conversion effect, as in both of these increase skill damage by 40% when used properly. So let's go ahead and take a look at Cold first. So you're going to want to put all your points into the conversion effect for the Cold stance, all the points into the magic regen on Magic Shot, and everything into the snap for damage. And this is our go-to stance that we want to be in. So when you start PvPing, you want to be in this stance when you begin the fight. And you want to be in it as much as possible. Now, of course, there's a few, maybe you're fighting a mob or something, you can't be in this stance, that's fine. But your main source of damage comes from here. Moving into Atmospheric. Atmospheric is more of a defensive form. You're going to still want to put all of your points into the conversion effect for skill damage, so that when you swap back to Cold, you'll be able to gain that extra 40% damage. Everything into Magic Shot for Mana Regen. 3 into the Snap for Thunderbolt, simply because it's not that powerful, and you're still going to want some form of damage while you're there to prevent healing naturally. So this is something that can be useful there. Another required point is Along the Wind for the 10% max mana when used. This lets you do some interesting things and allow for some interesting mix-ups in a PvP fight. And if you're doing PvE, you can actually go ahead and put points into Piercing Wind, as it's a very strong DPS cooldown when used properly against a single target. Moving into the chain skills, Elemental Armor with no enhancement. This is what I'm using. It's very powerful. It works, so I'm using it. The Blink Enhancement with max mana, and those are for obvious reasons for the build. For Disenchantment, again, everything into the 30% max spell power with cooldown reduction, obviously required. And then, of course, the Mana Shield with the Enhancement Stage 1, because Magic Shield is the strongest thing in this build. For the ability tree, this is the ability tree that I'm using right now. It's obviously going to change once I get more points, but this is the current maximum best usage of points for my current setup. So use whatever is best for you overall. Just do the math real quick and you can figure it out pretty easy. So actually getting into the build, the reason why this works so well is because of the conversion effects. So when you swap, you get the 40% damage increase buff here that you can see on the bottom right. You have the instant snaps, so you never have to stop moving. You have the mana regeneration for Magic Shot. You have basically an almost infinite elemental armor for 50% damage reduction. Now, we don't need the armor to turn into phantasmal armor. We want it to only stay elemental armor, because when it turns to phantasmal armor, when you take 25% vitality, it reduces the damage from the next attack by 30%. The problem is that we're not using vitality. Health is meaningless to us. We could have 1 health and it wouldn't change anything. The difference is that our health bar is technically our mana bar now, because of the way that Mana Shield works. So this just adds a flat 15% damage reduction, which means that technically we have more mana. Disenchant Enhancement +3 is going to allow us to be able to burst targets in Frost like we used to. Before, we would just be able to snap and not have to worry about it. But now we have to use conversions plus Disenchantment in order to be able to do similar damage to what we were doing before. Also going into that, when you're in this spec, in this Atmospheric stance, you're not going to be doing nearly as much damage as you were if you were in Frost. So what you should actually be doing is, if you're low on mana, you should be using your Blinks or number 1 effectively in order to regen mana, because mana is your life at this point. When you swap to ice, you're going to want to be stacking disenchantment plus the ice spec in order to deal maximum biting cold damage. Again, if you get in trouble, do not be afraid to use the magic shot in order to regain effective health with the mana bar and be able to use blink for mana. Now, you don't have to worry about the movement on blink because movement isn't that important now because you can simply tank everything by spamming 1. Now, if you get into a 1v2 situation or you're getting bursted down, then of course you can use blinks, and of course it's basically like a big health cooldown to restore your health. Make sure that your elemental armor is always up. Now, there's going to be a 15-second window where you will not be able to use or have elemental armor on, and that's just something that you have to get used to. For the most part, you can just kind of spam it when it's off cooldown, and for the most part, you'll be able to gain some benefit from using elemental armor. But the idea behind this build is that you regen mana faster than your enemies are able to take it away from you. And if you're balancing mana regeneration with your damage, you'll have no problem winning in PvP. So here you go, guys, for your mages. I'm going to be taking a look at the other classes to see if there's anything similar to this. And again, this might change like tomorrow, right? So I'll be updating and making more videos as I learn more. Okay, thanks, guys.